Aunt Lila's hand hovered over the foyer table before she eased the lacquered lid back. Inside, a shattered porcelain bird tangled in Mara's birthday ribbon. "If we stay quiet, maybe it stops bleeding," she whispered. And as the ribbon slipped, it revealed a coffee-stained note they all pretended not to see. She let the lid fall into place with a soft click, fingers brushing dust from the table as if erasing proof. Morning light warmed the hallway. The kettle had just stopped whistling, and Mara's footsteps padded carefully upstairs so the framed photos wouldn't tremble. Lila returned the ribbon to the box with the steadiness of someone used to small disasters. Mara's reflection in the foyer mirror watched her without flinching, matching the room's steady rhythm. Lila grabbed a clean cloth, wiped the lacquer once more, and closed the box as if the secret never existed. Outside, a neighbor's cat walked the windowsill, tail flicking. The hall clock's tick marked another hour of Mara's birthdays. Nothing jolted. Nothing leapt. Just the ordinary motion of a house that had learned to fold its stories away. Jonah's phone buzzed on the coffee table while the last people settled into folding chairs. Mara watched the door. The air still smelled of burnt coffee abandoned when the argument began. Carla stood with interview notes, fingers spread as if bracing against the room's vibration. "We agreed to keep asking, not to sweep," Jonah said, voice taut enough to make his chair creak. Carla slid a page toward Mara without looking up. "Interview with Julian Tuesday." He heard footsteps behind the closet again. He didn't say why he was there, and he wouldn't name the other caller. Mara's knuckles whitened on her cup. "We agreed that mentioning the caller just stirs things." "But the footsteps weren't there last month," Carla insisted. "Julian flinches when he looks in the hall. He sees it in reflections. That's not just fear anymore." Jonah stood, palms on his jeans. "Enough theatrics. We're not digging any more secrets tonight." Mara slammed the cup down, splashing coffee. "The theatrics are what keeps us honest," she snapped. "Everyone says there's tension, but no one names the how. We can't pretend it's just nerves." Carla met her eyes. "Name the how, then. Otherwise, you're just pinning pressure on the rest of us." Mara laughed once, short. "You want the whole hidden story? Wait until we can survive the fallout." She went for her coat. "But I'm done pretending this fear is quiet." Jonah followed halfway. "You can't pretend it's nothing." "I'm not dumping it," she said, zipper clattering. "But I'm not letting anyone pretend silence is peace." Carla exhaled, clutching the papers. "So we stay, keep asking, keep tracking what people won't say. But we don't force it tonight." Mara's shoulders relaxed barely. "Fine, but if one more person says nothing's left unsaid, I'm walking." Jonah sat, heavy, and opened a notebook. "We'll keep the interviews coming," he promised softly. "We'll keep naming the fear. That's enough for now." Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, they listened, breath held for the next move. Lena shoved her chair back, the scrape tearing through the quiet. She didn't look up as she braced on the table. "Every time the room goes still," she said flatly, "I feel silence coil up, waiting to snap." Her fingers dragged over the wood until it rasped. "I'm not doing this for drama. I'm trying to show you how heavy it is just sitting there." Her eyes finally caught Mara's. "If you keep calm, I can breathe. But maybe you need to know I'm the one hearing nothing, and it hurts." She let go of the table, and it shuddered. Mara folded and unfolded the napkin. "We all heard Julian," she said. "But I shoved my questions down. I told myself I was protecting you." She turned to Julian. "I shut up when you mentioned people after the closet. I thought silence would let fear pass. Instead, everyone guessed." Her fingers crushed the napkin. "You're struggling alone, and I was too afraid to break the pattern." Noah leaned by the door, arms crossed so tight his knuckles were white. He cracked them loudly. "I kept saying later because I assumed you needed space. Now the silence is loud enough to drown me out." He stepped forward, blinking like he stepped into bright light. "I'm done pretending I don't hear it. Who's suffocating most from this quiet? I'm not guessing anymore." Julian stayed seated, the crease between his brows deeper, as if he still stared at the closet. He looked at Lena, Mara, Noah. "I'm on the edge," he said quietly. "I let silence corner me because I thought anyone asking would make it worse. But I can't hold the line alone." He reached for the envelope, fingers grazing the staple before opening it. He didn't read aloud, but opening it, small and deliberate, felt like defiance. "I promise to speak when needed. If you want answers, I'll try." Lena blinked. Her shoulders eased. Mara squeezed the napkin until it popped. Noah stepped closer, hand on Lena's chair. Julian lowered the envelope, the crease in his brow smoothing. The air shifted. Silence was still there. But they now knew someone was hurt by it, and each had admitted contributing. No hidden details were spoken yet. But that admission, that silence had victims and protectors, sent a tremor through the room. Noah slid out an extra chair with a scrape, motioning for them to gather. "We don't have to do the rest now," he said. "But we can check in, one direct thing at a time." The simple act of offering a beginning proved silence could be broken without spilling secrets. The burden didn't vanish, but the truth nudged forward. Lena exhaled, quieter. The room changed. Someone else could see the cracks, and the instinct to stay silent was finally named. Lena stood in the doorway with a crumpled stack of mail. As she stepped forward, the hallway light caught the dust on the banister, Julian's report of closet footsteps still thick in the air. "If we pretend there's nothing, he'll keep whispering there's more," she said, slamming the envelopes on the counter so the glasses rattled. Noah rubbed his neck and cracked open the living room closet door. A breath of stale air flooded out. Julian, watching him, muttered, "You ever feel like silence is a locked door you keep walking past?" The door thumped back shut, echoing the tension. Mara shoved her hands in her coat pockets, fabric squeaking. "Are we circling it again?" she asked. "I can't swallow the fear for you." Her eyes flicked to Lena and Julian, whose fingers flexed on the armrest. "I watched you soften so you wouldn't scare each other," she said, but fear of judgment froze my words. She stepped toward Noah, voice low. "Ask him what he saw. Ask what he wants to hide. Stop drafting gentle questions. Just ask." Noah stood still, breathing shallow. Julian's jaw tightened. "I told you I saw the footsteps, and I won't repeat the name. But you refused to push past that because you feared hurting someone." He swung his legs off the sofa and stood. "So now I ask, who are we protecting, and what from?" He snatched a coffee table book, flipped it open, and slammed it down. Papers scattered. Mara's voice softened and hardened. "I ducked questions not because I didn't want answers, but because I thought they would ruin the people I love. But the longer I stayed silent, the more I let everyone think silence was safe." She crouched, gathered the papers, and handed a torn photograph to Lena. "Take it to him. Tell him we're done letting fear steer us." Noah finally stepped into the hall, shoulders squared. "Fine," he said. "I'll call again. This time I'll ask the precise question. No sugarcoating. We break the silence or stop pretending it's harmless." His hand hovered over the phone. Mara nodded once, a sharp exhale. Lena placed the photo on the console and pressed a thumb to the corner. "I can't keep carrying this hush," she said. "Let's check in, even when it's uncomfortable. We owe ourselves that." Julian glanced at the closet before picking up the phone, gaze steady. Mara met Lena's eye and offered the faintest half-smile. Acceptance, tension, folding into resolve. The hallway light flickered. Noah dialed. The room waited, anchored to honesty even as they bristled at the cost. Noah set the phone face up on the coffee table, the recorder's red light blinking. Lena spread the torn photograph beside it, the edges curling. Julian paced the island, rubbing his neck while Mara stared at the ceiling like plaster could witness without failing. He pressed call. The line hummed. A pause, then a sharp, steady voice. "Julian, Mara, Lena. I thought if I stayed quiet, the rest of you would stay safe." It was Elise, from the night of the footsteps. Lena's fingers tightened on the photo. The paper creaked. Elise didn't waste air. "I'm not the villain you think. But I was left in the dark with the riverbed story. That night wasn't an accident, and hiding it made me vanish from your family. I'm still here, waiting for you to admit silence cost me a place at the table." Her words landed like stones. Mara shoved the photograph at Lena. "It's her handwriting, my mother's sister. She wrote, 'I shouldn't have left you alone with it,' on the back." Lena read it aloud, voice flat, then flipped the photo to reveal a date, August 17th. Julian blinked. The same date was faintly written inside his journal. "We were protecting Elise from blame," Julian shouted, slamming the table. "But we were also protecting ourselves from the fear that speaking would change who we thought we were." Mara leaned in. "I didn't ask the direct questions because I thought we'd crumble. But every night I let silence keep hold. I watched you drift from yourselves. That's exile, not protection." Noah held the phone so Elise could hear the shift. "Tell them what you saw," he said. "Let them stop pretending they can undo it by pretending it never happened." Elise swallowed. The scratch of a chair came through as she leaned in. "Silence made me a stranger. But I can keep talking, keep repeating the truths until you say them yourself." Lena exhaled, grief pulling back into place, and reached for Julian's sleeve. He didn't move right away. When he did, he nodded, the way you nod toward a painful but necessary path. The reward came as a sharp unclench. Mara whispered, "I'm calling her every week." Julian unclenched. Noah met Lena's eyes. She nodded. The room felt fuller. They weren't erasing what happened, but they named the person their silence had left out, Elise, and agreed to stop letting the story isolate her. Julian flipped the photograph back. "We keep this up," he said. "No more pretending it isn't draining us." Elise's breathing steadied, relieved, waiting for the next promised check-in. The scene ended with Noah jotting the next call date, the pen scratching affirmation onto paper. A checkpoint for keeping truth alive. Noah stood in the doorway, phone to his ear, knuckles white. "Elise," he said before the call connected. "We're all here." The ringtone thrummed. When she answered, Julian slid onto the couch arm, eyes darting between him and the family. Mara leaned forward, fingers curled around the torn photo as if it could keep her steady. Elise's voice came through quiet, but steady. "Noah?" The silence stretched. Lena, still holding the photograph, whispered, "Tell her she's not alone." Noah switched to speaker. Elise breathed in, braced. "I want to see you, not just hear voices." Lena nodded, tears rising, and the photo slipped from her fingers onto the table. We'll have coffee, Julian murmured. Maybe we'll finally explain what those footsteps meant. Mara placed a hand over Lena's. I'm keeping this picture, not as a reminder of what was hidden, but what we're choosing to keep visible. Noah listened a moment more, then asked, Will you say her name, Elise? The phone crackled. Elena? The family exhaled together, the air loosening. Elise's voice softened. I'll hold that name with you. I'll call every week. If there's anything I can do, I'll be there. Julian stood suddenly, rattling the table. He looked at Lena, then Mara, eyes bright with adrenaline. We keep speaking, he said, and we stop pretending silence ever healed anything. They moved closer, proximity acting as punctuation, and the weight of not hearing someone's voice shifted into the weight of calling again. Noah moved toward the kitchen with memos for next week's check-in, Elise's name echoing as a new anchor. The call ended with Elise promising to come by. Noah slid the phone in his pocket, shoulders finally dropping. Mara settled next to Lena, both wet-eyed but steadier, fingers interlaced over the torn photo. We keep naming her, Mara said, looking at Lena. Every week, until saying her name isn't swallowed up. Lena nodded, gripping the picture like a map they all agreed to follow. Julian stood, sweeping them with a glance. No more hiding. Elise is coming next week. We'll be here. No one argued. Their refusal to return to silence hung in the air like a tangible thing, buildable, steady, impossible to ignore. Noah leaned over the kitchen table, flipping through the spiral notebook where yesterday's smudges lined the margin. This week, I call Elise Wednesday at 8, he said, tapping the empty column. No detours. We ask if she's okay, then let her ask us anything. Lena slid a pen across the page to write, Lena check-in, next to Wednesday, then pushed the book toward Mara. You take Saturday, she mouthed. Mara rubbed her thumb along the torn photograph's edge. The room smelled like boiling café con leche, sharp enough to clash with the tension. I'll text Elise every morning about the plan, she said, eyes on Lena. If she senses hesitation, she'll stop answering. I want her to hear we're here, even when it's hard. Lena forced a nod while staring at the green calendar, days lined like bars waiting to open. Julian lifted the speakerphone case and set it between them. I can be in the room for any call, he said. Call me when silence creeps in, and I'll say it now. He paused, breath sharp. No more hiding the question behind a joke. He tapped the calendar for Thursday at 7. I'm clear. His voice cracked higher than planned, so he inhaled and raised a palm. I'm not going to shield the hardest part anymore. The line might crack, but it was real. Lena pushed the torn photograph toward the center, smoothing the split. I made a list of what I keep back, she said, voice shaky but steady. Starting tonight, I read that list before we call Elise. No more saving the hardest pieces for whispers. She glanced at Mara. If I close, slap my wrist or say, it's not over. Mara snatched the list, eyes wet but steady. Done, she whispered, pressing her thumb on the month on the calendar like sealing a promise. Noah reached the shelf holding the family letters. He pulled down the wooden box, set it beside the phone, and flipped it open. I want this box out every time we speak, he said, holding a torn letter so faded ink faced them. If silence creeps back, we touch it and remember this. His voice cracked. Then he smiled. We answer before fear can. Lena touched the brittle paper, tremor leaving her shoulders, and placed it back upside down, sealing the promise with the visible weight of their plan. Julian scanned them for any recoil. If Elise needs space, he asked, not to derail but to fortify the plan. Mara shook her head. Then we respect it, but we say, we're still here. Call any time. Noah shut the notebook. Every Thursday we check, no excuses. If someone can't speak, we sit cross-legged and stay in the room for 5 minutes. We stay instead of letting silence run the show. Lena inhaled sharply and exhaled. Okay, she whispered, wiping tears with her hand. I'm in. The kettle whistled again, and this time, silence no longer ruled the room. Mara wrote the plan in bold letters on a sticky note. Weekly calls, daily texts, Lena reads list, Julian's reminders. She stuck it below the photograph on the fridge. Noah grabbed his phone and dialed Elise, speaker on. Elise, we wanted to share what we're doing, he said immediately. Lena pressed the note to her heart and leaned forward so Elise could hear her breath. We're choosing healing, she said, and the tension in her throat loosened enough to keep her voice steady. Elise's thin voice came through. I hear you, she said. Thank you for staying in touch. The room relaxed, shoulders dropping with the sound of her words. I'll see you next week, Noah replied. Lena readied the list on the table, paper trembling less with each breath. They let the call end in silence, this time filled with plans, commitments, and the long, difficult work of keeping their promise to speak. They stood together, no hesitation, closing the notebook and sliding it back under the tray. The calendar now glowed with inked calls and check-ins. The silence above it had been replaced by the sound of action, names spoken, and a new openness they still had to protect. The door stood open to late sun. Steps that once trembled outside were now steady with Elise approaching. Her hand hovered over the threshold while Noah's voice on the speaker hummed through the hall, the Wednesday promise still alive. Lena held the torn photograph flat against the letterbox as if the edges could catch the light. She lifted her list, voice thin and hard, and began to read. Sentences stumbling into the room, each fracture finally named. Mara's fingers stayed on the doorway frame, palms warm. Not letting go of the promise, she whispered to keep Elise in sight. Julian, cheeks flushed, forced them to name the protections they'd been guarding, the silences they carried. And there was nowhere to hide from the sound of it. Elise stepped forward, reaching for Lena's hand, and the house exhaled a long, irrevocable breath as the decision settled between them.